Hostin, an orthopedic surgeon and husband of The View co-host Sunny Hostin, is accused in December lawsuit fraudulently billing insurance. By the way, this is a Daily Caller story I'm reading. The lawsuit alleges Hostin knowingly provided fraudulent medical and other healthcare services in exchange for kickbacks and or compensation, and names him among nearly 200 defendants in one of New York's largest RICO cases. Wow. Hostin's attorney, Daniel Twites, denies the allegations, calling the lawsuit a meritless attempt by a near-bankrupt insurance carrier to intimidate doctors and restrict healthcare benefits. The case involves claims that Hostin performs unnecessary surgeries on patients after minor accidents without exploring less invasive treatments, with American Transit citing New York's 1974 no-fault law as contributing to widespread.
As The View tries to contain the damage, Sunny Hostin's world just fell apart due to her husband's involvement in an astounding $450 million RICO case. Patrick Bett and Joe Rogan. Prepare yourself for a takedown, dripping with sarcasm, coffee, and a dash of RICO-sized retribution as David calmly and ruthlessly destroys her reputation, one podcast at a time. Their roasting is hilarious and remote.
With mostly everything that's been said, I mean, we know that, only about 31% of Americans trust our healthcare system. We have a terrible healthcare system. And, doctors suffer because of big corporations as well. Doctors that want to do good, like my husband, operates on someone even though they don't have insurance, and then has to sue health insurance companies to get paid for the work that he's been trained his whole life.
Interesting, because I think Sunny is very intelligent, but she's ideologically captured.
Right.
I think the other ones, there's a couple of the other ones, don't have to name any names, who are just very dull-minded. But I think Sunny's not one of them. I think she's smart, but captured.
Sure, I think she came into it with an agenda.
Of course. They do everything with an agenda.
Her husband, whose professional demeanor once shouted Harvard Law and courtroom gravitas, is now at the center of a $450 million RICO case. Sunny Hostin just took the express elevator from a respected TV legal analyst to a walking headline in a financial crime saga so outrageous that it makes Wolf of Wall Street look like a Girl Scout bake sale. Before the ink on the indictment had even dried, the most chaotic tag team in the world joined the chat room. The $450 million was allegedly redirected, mismanaged, laundered, and most likely folded into some offshore casino owned by a man named Tony, who wore an eye patch. Patrick Bett and Joe Rogan David, no, they didn't have a conversation with Sunny. They didn't even cite her. They didn't argue with her. They just took a step back, considered the circumstances, and set off two very different types of dynamite.
You're married, Tom, you're married. If your husband's doing something, if he's allegedly doing something like this, you guys would know if your wives were up to some nefarious stuff. Let's just not forget who she is. She's been, for years, lecturing America about morality, inequality, systemic failures, and look at her track record. How many times does she have to go on in the past 2 months and look at the camera and do a legal apology for all the stuff that she said on the show? And then she also, on Trump's win, calling the loss because of uneducated white women that Trump won.
We have to know that. This is accused.
All accused. Yeah, all accused, but he's in the RICO. This is a big RICO case that her husband's in.
What are your opinions? The man who made a living by questioning MMA fighters about DMT, Joe Rogan, took the philosophical barbarian route. Suddenly, he had enough material to fuel a week-long roast session, and roast he did, not with anger, but rather with astonishment, raised eyebrows, and the kind of smirking amusement typically reserved for watching a squirrel operate a vending machine.
And frankly, that show, you want to talk about a show that set women back, is The View. You want to talk about that show. If the CIA is engineering, Antifa and fucking the Capitol riot, some crazy misogynist engineered The View, because there's nothing worse than The View. In terms of, there are so many brilliant women out there. None of them are on The View. None of them have gone near the set of The View. I mean, they have brought in the lowest tier of the, what is it, the Y chromosome?
No, double
the
X.
Okay.
Double X.
They brought in the lowest of the double X's for that one.
For him, it's hypocrisy. Sunshine, who for years exuded moral superiority through her beauty regimen, suddenly has her husband essentially acting out an American Greed episode in real time. It's not just funny, it's a tragic comedy. The kind where you can't stop laughing because it's so terrifying and you're scared. Joe Ever, the philosopher of the people, didn't care about anger. Instead, he simply explained the scenario as if he were field dressing a wild boar, pointing out that someone might advocate for law and order on daytime television while ostensibly having pillow talk with a suspected racketeer. He didn't require specific quotes. Patrick bet David removed his gloves and put on a complete tactical outfit, but he didn't need conflict because the situation was already ridiculous enough to stand on its own like a goat in a tutu. Joe provided the amusement. Bringing the spreadsheets was Patrick. Patrick didn't begin with the ethical perspective. Oh no, he began by learning math. Hardcore finance math, bro. Between sips of lukewarm coffee, he examined the $450 million, dissected it as though it were a failed startup, and posed the questions that no one on The View dared to ask. What sort of infrastructure is required to manage that many phony accounts? And how can a guy move from having professional employment to running what appears to be a Fortune 500 fraud ring? Creative accounting flaws and shell firms. Even though he didn't say it, it was obvious that this wasn't your typical scandal involving insider trading. Grand Larry gave TED speeches on ethics while sporting a tuxedo and sipping champagne.
It's always the people that always do the pointing, and it always comes back to them, all right? So when you said this is the largest RICO case ever filed in the state of New York, you guys wrap that around your brain. That's bigger than the mafia case. Like the mafia one was number one. This one takes it over. So he was scamming insurance companies from taxi drivers, Uber drivers, and Lyft drivers. He was performing unnecessary surgeries and then providing fraudulent medical services in exchange of.
For him, it's hypocrisy. Sunshine, who for years exuded moral superiority through her beauty regimen, suddenly has her husband essentially acting out an American Greed episode in real time. It's not just funny, it's a tragic comedy. The kind where you can't stop laughing because it's so terrifying and you're scared. Joe Ever, the philosopher of the people, didn't care about anger. Instead, he simply explained the scenario as if he were field dressing a wild boar, pointing out that someone might advocate for law and order on daytime television while ostensibly having pillow talk with a suspected racketeer. He didn't require specific quotes. Patrick bet David removed his gloves and put on a complete tactical outfit, but he didn't need conflict because the situation was already ridiculous enough to stand on its own like a goat in a tutu. Joe provided the amusement. Bringing the spreadsheets was Patrick. Patrick didn't begin with the ethical perspective. Oh no, he began by learning math. Hardcore finance math, bro. Between sips of lukewarm coffee, he examined the $450 million, dissected it as though it were a failed startup, and posed the questions that no one on The View dared to ask. What sort of infrastructure is required to manage that many phony accounts? And how can a guy move from having professional employment to running what appears to be a Fortune 500 fraud ring? Creative accounting flaws and shell firms. Even though he didn't say it, it was obvious that this wasn't your typical scandal involving insider trading. Grand Larry gave TED speeches on ethics while sporting a tuxedo and sipping champagne.
Giuliani shook the tree and a bunch of mobsters fell out, right? This is big stuff. And so, and thank you for bringing that video. It sure is ironic that she's up there. So, but if she didn't really know what was going on, right, which is what she's probably going to say later, oh, I had no idea what my husband and his associates were doing. We'll wait and see what that is. But I think it's pretty freaking ironic.
Yeah, I have a totally different perspective on this. I don't really know what happened with this. The facts will come out. What I have a problem with is the core of who this woman is. Unlike you, I don't watch The View, bro. All I do is see clips.
It's just like twice a day.
Here's all I hear from her. America's violent. America's racist. America's bad. Okay. I challenge you, Sonny. And this is Konstantin Kisin actually was saying something about this. Find me a country that's not racist.
Of all places, Patrick's breakdowns went viral on LinkedIn. Indeed, LinkedIn is the site where individuals pretend to love the hustle culture at 6 in the morning, and everyone seemed to agree that this was poetic justice dipped in irony and deep-fried in schadenfreude. The storyline collapses on itself like a souffle cooked in a wind tunnel, undermining every sanctimonious speech and every instance of high-ground moralizing that has ever reverberated through the ABC soundstage. It's not just that Sonny's husband is allegedly involved in a multi-million-dollar racketeering operation. Joe Rogan simply looks at it in amused surprise and lets his audience fill in the details without even calling it out. His dry, subtly sardonic laughter serves as the soundtrack for the demise of a carefully constructed image that has been carefully cultivated over years. There is a certain satisfaction in seeing someone so deeply ingrained in the elite media bubble be pierced by the very values they have wielded like swords. And then Patrick shows up with the wrecking ball called accountability. He doesn't have to speak loudly. Instead, he methodically dissects this scandal like a forensic accountant at a roast.
Is that show has this very specific ideological bubble in which they operate in, and they always bring on a token conservative woman and they yell over her and silence her, and they did that with Meghan McCain, and they did that with what is that other blonde woman from Survivor? Do you remember her, Jamie? She was always yelling. I mean, it's a bizarre show. I think the way before you start, I think the way you described it is brilliant, and the way we should all look at it. Of course, you're going to see race. The idea of being colorblind is ridiculous, but treat everybody. They're just human beings.
Yeah.
Everybody's just individual.
You can almost see the spreadsheets dancing in Joe Rogan's eyes as he compares expense reports with alleged offshore transactions and raises an eyebrow, wondering why no one noticed when hundreds of thousands of dollars went on an unsupervised vacation to the Cayman Islands. If his method is the sardonic laugh of a bar patron watching the TV news in disbelief, then you can picture it. Somehow, Joe and Patrick's divergent viewpoints came together to form the perfect storm, even if they didn't plan it or meet in a hidden cigar lounge to plot the decade's most methodical character annihilation. Patrick Bet David is the cold stare of a man who, for effect, printed out the 48-page indictment on perfumed paper after reading it twice. Joe Ryan went full crowd psychologist with the fervor of a man who could detect hypocrisy a mile away. He was not interested in evidence beyond the glaring contradiction. The spouse of a woman who uses television to educate the public about ethics is suddenly accused of a huge fraud case that makes the Fire Festival appear like a bake sale. Roger employed sarcasm rather than drama because he saw it as an example of elite delusion. With media elites posing as saints and their homes appearing to be built on Ponzi-Aped quicksand, Joe depicted the entire situation as a comic sketch. The ridiculousness essentially cooked itself. Nothing compares to someone displaying moral superiority while their spouse is supposedly evading a federal RICO probe.
See what Whoopi Goldberg said?
What'd she say?
Whoopi Goldberg said that Biden could arrest all the Republicans and put them in jail. You just need to see how unhinged this kind of thinking is. Well, you know what Joe Biden could do? Joe Biden, you have to see it because it's so
on TV.
crazy.
She said
In the meantime, Patrick Bet David arrived with a spreadsheet and the voice of a distraught father who had just learned that his children had embezzled monopoly money that he hadn't stolen. He dissected the logistics of a $450 million scheme with meticulous ruthlessness, as if he were opening a scam in real time. He made the point that you don't stumble into a multi-layered fraud case by chance. It takes planning, purpose, and Olympic-level dishonesty. Patrick made the entire situation into a botched business school lesson by exposing the operational foolishness of fake contracts, shell companies, and money trails that resembled the plot of a badly written thriller. He then raised the crucial question of how someone with such a public connection to Sonny Host managed to commit years' worth of alleged crimes without anyone noticing, either through willful detachment or blind ignorance, and neither seemed to fit together. Without exchanging a single word, Rogan and Bet David's entirely dissimilar skills came together to create a flawless takedown. Joe chose the soul, while Patrick chose the structure. By the time they were finished, one had destroyed the foundation, while the other had ridiculed the image. On Christmas morning, Sonny Hostin's public image had been ripped apart like old wrapping paper. No survivors, no rebuttal, no mercy.
You're taking Joey Behar, whatever her name is, as like a
as like a news,
This is
Joe,
right
as a news
after.
source.
Did you have a stroke? No. This is the most important part.
I don't know.
Hey, this is the most important part. This is right after she was saying, we are run by ABC News. You should trust us, not Joe Rogan, who believes in dragons. So she by saying we should trust them because they're double checked by ABC News, and then making the stupidest fucking statement. Like you didn't listen to what I said.
Yeah.
You didn't listen to what the wildlife biologist, and that's only a part of what he said.
I can't believe
the other
Joey
part of what he
Behar
said
didn't
was
weigh-
there was something before that where he was explaining encounters with.
And what was Sonny's answer? Oh, that's correct. No public legal money, no crickets, no my husband's innocent tour. Not even a touching Instagram story with a filter that shouts emotional harm and a gentle piano tune. She disappeared like a story point. Her credibility didn't collapse because someone said something. Rather, it imploded because she said nothing at all in a world where damage control was practically an Olympic event. It's as if the writers forgot to finish by pressing control. Plus Z and pretending the entire Rico subplot never happened. But the internet remembers that the silence was louder than any statement she could have made. Her ghosting tactic didn't work out. Amazingly, she is already serving a life sentence in the court of public opinion for excessive irony, aggravated hypocrisy, and involuntary meme, even though there hasn't been a court ruling yet. Production Bet and Roger David turned a scandal into a digital legend rather than merely commenting on it. What constitutes humiliation for this tag team? What makes them truly memorable is that they didn't have to yell, demand coverage, or plan a cable TV retort. Instead, they simply watched, remarked, and let the ridiculousness unfold like a ball of yarn in a room full of coffee-drinking cats. Joe brought attention to the ridiculous, Patrick emphasized the impractical, and they produced a two-man takedown that didn't require consent, audience participation, or punchlines.
Show that people love to hate.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
They get so much hate watching and hate watching viral clips of them saying ridiculous things. I mean, it is a rabies infested hen house.
And
the audience is not really their audience. Their audience is a group of people they bring in to watch television shows. You know, I don't know if you've ever seen audiences before for TV shows, but a lot of them are paid. They're paid to be there. So, because they have to guarantee that there's going to be people there. So there's services that you hire. And when a show gets really, really popular, you know, like Letterman or something like that, obviously it has its own fan base.
Right.
Those people will try to get tickets before anybody else does. And in that case, they probably don't need to use a service anymore. They just get actual fans. But arguably, like, the fans, the real fans of The View that are like, oh, these ladies are on point, most of those people can't leave the house. Like, they're probably...
Right.
At the end of the day, Joe and Patrick weren't even speaking to her. Instead, they were talking around her, above her, through the entire illusion of integrity that collapsed like a house of cards rigged with C4. This meant that Sonny's brand, which was polished precisely on high ground, wasn't chipped. Rather, it was carpet-bombed. And not by enemies, but by commentators who didn't even need her present to win the argument. Joe's admirers posted the videos with remarks such as, "This aged like milk." The legal system is preparing for a protracted, slow process through financial forensics, wire fraud allegations, and what is anticipated to be an avalanche of email chains ending in, "Let's discuss offshore," while Patrick's followers turned the scandal into case studies about moral bankruptcy and elite arrogance. Throughout it all, the one-liners continue to fly, not from courtroom comedians, but from two podcasters who saw a scandal and treated it like performance art, with no face-offs or counter-arguments. There are only two distinct methods for public demolition. Nothing screams credibility like waking up to learn that your husband has been charged in a RICO case so large it might qualify as its own GDP category, and nothing rips that credibility. Apart faster than two guys with microphones, an internet connection, and a combined tolerance for hypocrisy of exactly 0. Joe laughed, Patrick calculated, and Sonny, well, she just happened to be next to the biggest financial crime punchline of the year.
In the criminal case, now the prosecutors are like, oh, really? Well, how about we add some additional fraud charges onto you? And they're talking about threatening him with insurance fraud, which I would say you could get about 20 years in prison. So that's a death sentence for him.
It's not that Joe or Patrick despise Sunny, they don't even care enough to make fun of her directly. This is a slow-motion media car crash, and the only people involved are Joe Rogan and Patrick Bet David. Instead of sending flowers, they enter the room, set up their cameras, and begin filming the punchlines. In the end, Sunny's silence wasn't dignified. Rather, it was deafening, and her absence only made the takedown more poetic, because when your detractors don't even need to quote you to embarrass you, you've reached a new level of public collapse. Joe shifted the focus, and Patrick reversed the roles.